Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the 5 questions that I hear most about overlanding and my Dodge Durango. Number 5, why is camping called overlanding? Well, this is something I hear from a lot of friends and family and people I talk to about overlanding. For this question, I'm actually going to refer to a video made by Jason from the Primal Outdoors channel. I'll link it in the description below. But he outlined this pretty well. Overlanding essentially is camping. It's like car camping. There really isn't a difference. When you hear the term overlanding, you think more of like Australia or out in the desert or up in the Arctic or something like that with this big expedition where someone is traveling over miles and miles of land. Well, that's essentially what this is. Really all overlanding is your method to get to your place to camp. The best example that I've heard is when this is likened to backpacking. And Jason uses this in his video. But when you go backpacking, it's assumed that you're going to go camping. So you pack all of your stuff into your pack, you walk miles and miles out to this remote place, and you camp. But you just say backpacking. Whereas overlanding is the same thing. You know, instead of a hiking pack, I have everything packed into my rig. And instead of walking, we're driving. Sometimes it's over paved roads, sometimes it's over logging roads, and sometimes it's over very primitive 2-track hardcore trails. So to answer the question, yes, overlanding is the same thing as camping, but overlanding is the term that we use to describe how we get to camp. Number 4. My vanity license plate with my ham radio call sign on it. I get a lot of comments about my license plate. Yes, I am a licensed ham radio operator, and that is my call sign. I was originally licensed under a different call sign, but when my grandpa passed away in 2013, I was able to take over his call sign and keep it on the air. He was W7PRV. I came from a whole family of ham radio operators. My mom's a ham, dad's a ham, grandpa was a ham. So I was first introduced to it when I was pretty young. I was about 10 years old, and I was absolutely fascinated by it. Being able to sit and listen to my grandfather talking to somebody in Japan out of just this little box was absolutely astounding and just fascinating to me at 10 years old. Since then, it's proved to be one of my favorite hobbies and actually one of the most useful hobbies that I have. Over the years, ham radio has come in handy in a number of different situations, and I've been active in several clubs, in emergency response groups and things like that. I've made a lot of friends through ham radio as well, and it really comes in handy for trail communications between rigs, or checking in back home when there's no cell service. We're fortunate in Oregon to have a lot of linked repeater systems, so someone could sit here on the Oregon coast while I'm over in Central Oregon, and I can link into a repeater system and be able to talk to home without cell service or anything like that. So yes, that's the answer to number 4. Number 3. How do you find cool places to drive and camp? Well, this question probably belongs further up on the list. I get asked this a lot. There's lots of videos put out by numerous different channels about how to find trails and campsites and things like that. Kind of like this one from Winston Kim. Ask anybody that does this and we'll all kind of tell you probably the same thing, or at least roughly the same answer. I use a variety of mapping software and apps that help me find where I want to go and what I want to do. For example, I will pick an area that I want to explore and I will pull it up on like Google Maps or Google Earth and just kind of identify some places that I think are cool looking. And then I also use other apps like Gaia GPS. I use a lot. I also use The Dirt, iOverlander, Onyx Off-Road. There's a number of different things that I use. But I pick an area that I want to explore. I look at what's available. I pull up iOverlander and The Dirt to see if there's some established campsites already in that area. And I'll take those coordinates, and I'll actually download them and bring them into like Gaia GPS, where I can double check my public lands to make sure that I'm camping, in a spot where I'm allowed to camp, so that I'm not accidentally camping on private land. And then I also plan out a route loosely based on those sites. So there's lots of different methods to finding places to go and things to do. But ultimately, you take that route that you develop, and the best way to figure it out is to get out and explore it yourself. Get in the car, go to the area, drive it. You have a rough idea based on all the maps that you looked at and all the apps that you looked at. But now that you have that, the best way to find and discover great things is to just go out there and discover great things. Number 2, what got you interested in overlanding? Well, I've always been an outdoors enthusiast, clear back as far as I can remember. I love to hike, I love to camp, and I love to travel. My passion for travel probably started way back with my grandparents. We'd load everything up into their tiny little motorhome, and we would drive. And we would visit national parks and state parks and all sorts of historical sites and things like that along the way. I was introduced to off-roading when I was about 12. My dad had a bunch of friends at work who were into off-roading, or jeeping, as we called it back then. And we went with them a couple of times, and my dad was hooked. And he bought a brand new 98 Jeep Wrangler. We started taking it out into the woods on trail rides and slowly started upgrading it and things like that. And it wasn't long before Dad was actually pretty well known in the off-road community up in the Seattle area, to the point where he even ran a pretty successful website for a long time called nwjeepin.com. They're just a Facebook group now, but it was really a good website for getting information on where was legal to go jeeping, what the trails and stuff were like. It was a great website. But anyway, probably my favorite memory was our ghost town hunting trip. We hitched the Jeep up to our motorhome, and we went all over the Pacific Northwest, eastern Washington, Idaho, eastern Oregon, and we would drive up into the hills in search of old homesteads and mining towns and relics, and it was really a lot of fun. And I think that's where my passion for overlanding really started. I could combine the driving out into the woods and the camping and the travel. And that's where we're at today. Okay, the number one question that I get asked all the time about overlanding and my Dodge Durango is, why the Dodge Durango? Most people say, well, why not a Tacoma or a Tundra or a 4Runner? Well, that's really the key, right? It's not your typical overlanding vehicle. It's not a Tundra. It's not a Tacoma. It's not a Jeep. Now, don't get me wrong. I like those vehicles, but everyone else is doing them and they all look the same. That doesn't mean they're not capable vehicles, and that doesn't mean that I wouldn't be happy to own one, but I've always liked to be a little bit different. And the Durango is just that, it's different. I've always been a big proponent of do what you can with what you have. When I look at some of the overlanding forums and Facebook groups and things like that, I see a lot of people who say, gosh, I'd really love to start overlanding, but I am waiting for the right vehicle, or I don't know how to get started, or this or that. Well, that's just it. You got to just start. The reality is the perfect vehicle is the one that you already have. It doesn't have to be a built-out Tacoma, with a big lift and a rooftop tent and all that stuff. There's an awful lot that you can explore in nothing but your Lincoln Town Car. You load your camping stuff into the trunk, you pick a dirt road and go. Now, obviously, there's limitations. You're not going to get a Lincoln Town Car the same place you're going to get a big Jeep or Tacoma, but there's just as many accessible and beautiful places that can be found just in whatever vehicle you have right now in your driveway. If you wait for the perfect rig, you're going to wait forever. So alas, I have the Durango. I wanted to get back out and do more remote camping and more driving out in the woods and things like that, but I didn't want to ruin my daily driver. I have a fairly nice vehicle that is my daily. Now, there's lots of folks who do overland their daily driver, and it's nothing against them, but my personal preference was I didn't want to ruin my vehicle that got me to and from work. And we had this Durango in the yard. It was purchased as a spare vehicle in case there were any issues. But it was just sitting there in the yard, not running, not moving. So I decided, well, why not build that into my off-road camping vehicle, my adventure rig? So I made some minor repairs and I took out some seats, I added a few things, and that weekend I took it out into the woods and did a little one night camping in the Durango. So that's proof right there that you can just get out and go. You don't have to wait for the perfect vehicle. I mean, is it the ideal or perfect vehicle for this? Not according to the stereotype of overlanders, but it's perfect for what I like to do. And it didn't cost me 80 or 100 grand to get started. Now the Durango comes with its own challenges though. It's big and heavy. There isn't much in the way of headroom. With the sleeping platform in the back, space is really at a premium. But I've managed to make the best out of it and really turn this thing into my perfect adventure rig. I've got a secondary battery with an inverter to keep my electronics charged. I've got a space to sleep. I've got a place to store food, water, and other supplies for an extended expedition. I do have some future plans, lots of future plans for the Durango, including a modest lift. I'm not building like a rock crawler or anything like that, so I don't need a big 6-inch lift or anything like that. But something that'll give me a little bit better load capacity and a little bit better clearance on the trails would be great. I also have some ideas for a heat exchanger to have hot water. I've got ideas for heating, overnight heating, like a way to adapt a diesel heater, and lots of other ideas. Overall, is the Durango the best vehicle for this? For me, I'd say yes. Thank you guys for tuning into this quick top 5 questions I get asked all the time. Again, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you don't miss an adventure or anything. If you found this video helpful or you enjoyed it or for some reason I made you laugh, please do give it a like. And just remember, always take the road less traveled.